Sir, you need to wait outside.
Wait outside? I'm canceling the contract. The $120 million deal is off.
You can't be serious!
A single act of disrespect at a crowded airport gate. A quiet command for a black man in a simple hoodie to wait outside, away from the other first-class passengers. For Apex Air, it was just another overbooked flight on a Tuesday morning. For gate agent Brenda Hoskins, it was a routine exercise of her small authority. But for the man she dismissed, Julian Vance, it was the final quiet insult in a lifetime of them. They had no idea who he was. They had no idea their casual cruelty was about to vaporize a $120 million contract and ignite a firestorm that would bring a corporate giant to its knees. This is the story of how one man's dignity proved more valuable than an entire fleet of jets. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar symphony of chaos. It was a thick stew of announcements, echoing in a dozen languages, the frantic squeal of luggage wheels on polished floors, and the low, anxious hum of thousands of people in motion. For Julian Vance, it was just noise. He sat calmly near Gate B42, a small island of tranquility in the rushing river of travelers. He was not a man who commanded attention by appearance alone. Dressed in a pair of dark, well-fitting jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a soft charcoal grey hoodie, with no logos, he could have been anyone. A graduate student, a tech developer, on his way to a conference, a son going home. He was, in fact, the last of those. He was flying to Seattle to see his mother, whose health had recently taken a turn. The phone in his hand displayed a picture of her smiling from a garden, her face framed by vibrant hydrangeas. He smiled softly. That was the only thing that mattered today. Getting to her. Julian was the founder and CEO of Auragen Dynamics, a company that had revolutionized the world of renewable energy logistics. His face was a regular feature in Forbes and Wired, but usually clean-shaven and dressed in a tailored suit. Today, with a few days of stubble and the simple travel attire, he was functionally anonymous, and he preferred it that way. He didn't fly private for personal trips. He believed in staying connected to the world his company served. It was a principle. Principles to Julian were the architecture of a person's character. He held a first-class ticket for Apex Air Flight 815. He'd paid the premium not for the champagne, but for the peace and quiet, hoping to clear his mind before seeing his mum. The boarding area was a microcosm of societal tension. A knot of anxious passengers had formed a shapeless blob near the priority lane, their faces etched with the familiar stress of travel. Presiding over this small kingdom of anxiety were two gate agents, their blue Apex Air uniforms looking stiff and uncomfortable. The senior agent was a woman in her late 40s, named Brenda Hoskins. She wore her authority like a shield, her lips set in a permanent thin line of disapproval. Her voice when she used the intercom was sharp and metallic, cutting through the terminal's din with practiced impatience. Her junior partner, a younger man named Gary Pendleton, seemed to exist in her shadow, echoing her sighs and nodding at her complaints. "I don't know what they expect," Brenda muttered to Gary loud enough for the first few passengers to hear. 17 standbys. The flight is oversold by 12. 12. It's a Tuesday morning, not the day before Christmas. Julian watched them, his gaze passive but analytical. He was a student of systems of human behavior. He saw Brenda's eyes scan the crowd, not with a look of service, but of assessment. She wasn't looking for people to help. She was looking for problems to manage, for people to put in their place. Her eyes swept past a white family in matching tracksuits, a boisterous group of college students, and a businessman in a wrinkled suit barking into his phone. Then her gaze landed on Julian. It lingered for a second longer than it had on anyone else. He saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes, the subtle shift in her posture. In that single moment, a narrative was written in her mind. Man in a hoodie. Young, black, probably on a discounted ticket or a buddy pass. Not a high-value customer. Julian had felt that gaze his entire life. It was the gaze that followed him in high-end stores, the gaze of a police officer slowing his cruiser, the gaze of a real estate agent assuming he was in the wrong neighborhood. It was a gaze that assessed and dismissed in a single silent beat. He met her eyes, held them for a moment, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod before returning his attention to his phone. He would not give her the satisfaction of a reaction. The announcement came crackling over the loudspeaker, Brenda's voice dripping with manufactured regret. Ladies and gentlemen, Apex Air Flight 815 to Seattle is currently overbooked. We are offering a travel voucher of $800 for any passenger willing to voluntarily give up their seat and take a later flight this evening. A collective groan went through the crowd. No one moved. The amount was an insult for a cross-country flight. Brenda's voice returned the edge sharper this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot begin boarding until this situation is resolved. We are now increasing the offer to $1,000. Silence. Julian needed to be on this flight. Evening was too late. He glanced again at the picture of his mother. Brenda sighed dramatically into the microphone. Okay, folks, we're going to begin the pre-boarding process. We will need to proceed with an involuntary denial of boarding if we do not get any volunteers. She gestured for families with small children and passengers needing extra assistance. After they were through, she began the first-class boarding call. Julian tucked his phone into his pocket, stood up, and joined the short line. When he reached the podium, he handed Brenda his phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. She scanned it. The machine beeped green, but she didn't look at the screen. She looked at him. First class. She asked, a note of incredulity in her voice. That's what the ticket says. Julian replied, his voice even and calm. Brenda's eyes narrowed. She tapped a few keys on her terminal, her expression souring. I see. It looks like you were one of the last to check in for this cabin. I checked in 24 hours ago. As soon as the window opened, Julian stated the fact, unadorned with emotion. It was true. He was meticulous. She ignored him, her gaze flicking past him to the white couple in expensive-looking travel wear waiting behind him. She gave them a quick apologetic smile before turning back to Julian. The gears were turning. The overbooking problem was still unresolved. She had a first-class cabin that was full and a line of standbys. And in front of her stood a man who, in her biased calculus, didn't fit the profile. Sir, she began, her tone shifting from curt to condescendingly sweet. We're in a bit of a pickle here with the numbers. The cabin is completely full, and we still have a delicate seating situation to resolve. Julian simply waited. He knew exactly where this was going. It's very crowded here in the boarding area. She continued, gesturing vaguely at the space around the podium. It's making it difficult for us to manage the queue. Then came the words that would unravel everything. We need the space inside the lane for our other priority passengers to organize themselves. Sir, would you mind stepping out of the line and waiting outside the boarding area? We'll call you if a seat becomes available. The silence that followed was heavy and profound. She hadn't just asked him to wait. She had asked him to leave the designated priority space. She had seen a first-class ticket, a black man in a hoodie, and concluded they could not possibly belong together. She had told him to wait outside, like someone who didn't belong. The couple behind him shifted uncomfortably. Gary, the junior agent, suddenly found the floor intensely interesting. Julian looked at Brenda, his calm expression unwavering, but a new coldness entered his eyes. It was a glacial calm, deep and dangerous. To be clear, he said, his voice dropping to a low, precise baritone that cut through the noise. You scanned my valid first-class boarding pass, and now you are telling me to leave the priority boarding lane and wait outside. It would just be for a few minutes while we sort this out," she said, her fake smile not reaching her eyes. "It's just procedural." Julian Vance held her gaze for one more second. He saw no remorse, no understanding, only the blank wall of petty bureaucracy and ingrained prejudice. He gave a single sharp nod. "I understand," he said. He then did exactly what she said. He turned, stepped out of the velvet-roped lane, and walked past the curious stares of the other passengers. He didn't go far. He stopped about 30 feet away, leaning against a pillar, and took out his phone. Brenda watched him go, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She had solved her problem. She had no idea she had just created a $120 million one for Apex Air. The world of high-stakes business doesn't operate on grand gestures and loud proclamations. It moves through quiet, decisive actions, a whispered word, a discreet email, a 2-minute phone call. As Julian Vance leaned against the cool steel of the pillar, the chaos of Gate B42 faded into a muffled roar. He wasn't angry. Anger was a hot, messy emotion. What he felt was a cold, crystalline clarity. It was the feeling a surgeon must have before making a critical incision. The problem had presented itself, and the solution was absolute. He scrolled through his contacts, his thumb moving with practiced speed. He didn't call the Apex Air customer service hotline. He didn't dial the number for their Platinum Elite VIP desk. He bypassed the entire corporate apparatus designed to absorb and neutralize customer complaints with apologies and airline miles. He pressed a single name, Amelia Hayes. Amelia was the chief financial officer of Origen Dynamics. She was a woman who thought in spreadsheets and spoke in quarterly projections. She was famously unflappable, having navigated the company through volatile market swings and aggressive takeover attempts. She and Julian shared a bond forged in the crucible of building a multi-billion-dollar company from a garage startup. They trusted each other implicitly. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was all business. "Julian, everything okay? I thought you'd be in the air by now." "Change of plans." "Amelia," Julian said, his voice perfectly level. He didn't raise it. He didn't fill it with emotion. He simply stated a new reality. "I'm at JFK. Problem with the flight." "You could say that," Julian replied, his eyes flicking over to Gate B42. He could see Brenda Hoskins chatting amiably with the couple that had been behind him in line, now comfortably processed and ready to board. "Amelia, I want you to execute Article 17, Section B of our corporate travel agreement with Apex Air." There was a half-second of silence on the other end of the line. Amelia knew every contract the company had ever signed by heart. Article 17, Section B was the nuclear option. It was the material breach clause, the one that allowed for immediate, unconditional termination of the entire agreement based on a failure to meet the core tenets of service and respect outlined in the preamble. It was designed for catastrophic failures, a safety scandal, a major data breach, or an act of gross negligence. "Julian, that's the Apex contract," she said, her voice tight with surprise. "The whole thing. That's a 5-year exclusive carrier agreement. It's valued at $120 million. "I'm aware of the valuation," Julian said. "I want it terminated, effective immediately. May I ask what's happened? Is this a safety issue?" Amelia's mind was already racing through the potential legal and logistical ramifications. Canceling a contract of this magnitude would be a nightmare. Rebooking thousands of monthly flights for their global staff, renegotiating with other carriers from a position of sudden need, it was a logistical tidal wave. Julian's gaze remained fixed on the gate. "It's a values issue. It's a respect issue. Apex Air has failed to meet the fundamental standards of conduct we require from our partners. That's all the justification you need to provide." He paused, then added a single detail. "Their gate agent here at B402 for Flight 815 just instructed me to leave the first-class boarding area and wait outside because she needed to sort things out." The implication was clear. The silence on Amelia's end was now glacial. She understood instantly. This wasn't about a delayed flight or a lost bag. This was about the core principles Julian had built their company on. Origin Dynamics had clauses in all its major contracts that mandated partners adhere to stringent diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. They weren't just words in an annual report. They were legally binding commitments. Julian had just been personally subjected to a violation of the very principles Apex Air had signed and agreed to uphold. "Consider it done," Amelia said, her voice now stripped of any hesitation. It was the voice of a loyal lieutenant receiving an order from their general. "I'll have our legal counsel Michael Chen draft the termination notice immediately. It will be in their CEO's inbox before your flight would have even pushed back from the gate." "Thank you, Amelia," Julian said. "Where are you going now?" "How will you get to Seattle?" she asked, her concern shifting from corporate to personal. "I'll figure it out," he said. "Don't worry about me. Execute the directive." "Done," she repeated. "Fly safe, Julian." He hung up. The entire call had lasted less than 2 minutes. From his vantage point, he watched the final boarding call for Flight 815. He saw Brenda and Gary exchange a look of relief. The overbooking situation had apparently resolved itself. Perhaps another passenger had volunteered at the last minute, or a few had failed to show up. They had forgotten about him completely. He was just a piece of the puzzle that had conveniently removed itself. As the last passenger scanned their ticket and walked down the jet bridge, Brenda picked up the microphone, her voice chirpy and pleased. "Final boarding for Apex Air Flight 815 to Seattle. All passengers should now be on board. We are closing the gate." Julian Vance watched the heavy door to the jet bridge swing shut with a solid, final thud. He didn't feel a pang of frustration or a sting of rejection. He felt nothing but the calm certainty of a decision made and an action taken. He had been deemed unworthy of a $3,000 seat on their airplane. So he had deemed them unworthy of a $126,000 contract. It was in its own way a perfectly balanced transaction. He turned and walked away from the gate, melting back into the anonymous river of travelers. He found a quiet corner in a nearby coffee shop, ordered a black Americano, and sat down. He pulled out his phone again, but this time he opened the app for Delta Airlines. Daniel Sterling, the CEO of Apex Air, believed in the sanctity of his morning routine. It was a ritual of control in a world of chaos. It began at 5:00 a.m. with a kale smoothie, followed by a 7-mile run, and culminated at 7:30 a.m. in his glass-walled office on the 50th floor of the Apex Tower in Atlanta. From this perch, he could survey his kingdom of silver planes crisscrossing the sky. His first hour was always the same, reviewing the previous day's operational reports and market analytics. On this particular Tuesday, the numbers were good. On-time performance was up 3%. Fuel costs were stable. The stock was trading high. He took a satisfied sip of his coffee. At precisely 8:47 a.m., an email landed in his inbox. It wasn't flagged as urgent by any automated system, but the sender's address made his eyes snap to attention: legaloragindynamics.com. The subject line was 6 words of pure cold dread. Notice of immediate contract termination. Agreement. X7. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. Agreement Large X7 44B wasn't just any contract. It was the Origin Dynamics account. It was the crown jewel of their corporate travel portfolio. It was the deal he himself had personally closed over a round of golf and a $5,000 bottle of scotch. It was 5 years of guaranteed revenue of thousands of business and first-class seats filled every week. It was $120 million. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked it open. The email was brutally efficient, stripped of all pleasantries. It was a masterpiece of legal lethality, penned by Origen's General Counsel, Michael Chen. Dear Mr. Sterling, pursuant to Article 17, Section B of the Master Service Agreement, WAHEC 744B, executed on October 1, 2024. This letter serves as official and immediate notification of the termination of said agreement in its entirety. Origen Dynamics is exercising this right due to a material breach of contract specifically relating to the standards of service dignity and non-discrimination outlined in the Preamble and Appendix C Code of Partner Conduct. The breach is considered incurable. As of the time of this notice, all booking privileges for Origen Dynamics employees through Apex Air channels are revoked. All outstanding invoices will be settled per the termination clause, and we expect a full reconciliation of accounts within 30 business days. We will not be engaging in further discussion on this matter. The decision is final. Sincerely, Michael Chen, General Counsel, Origen Dynamics. Daniel Sterling read it once, then a second time, then a third. His breathing grew shallow. Incurable breach standards of dignity. What the hell happened? There was no explanation, no specific incident cited. Just a corporate death sentence delivered by email. He slammed his hand on the intercom button on his desk. Get me Catherine Pierce. Now he barked at his executive assistant. Catherine Pierce, the executive vice president of North American operations, was in his office in 90 seconds, a questioning look on her face. She was a seasoned professional who had seen every crisis the airline industry could throw at her, from volcanic ash clouds to pilot strikes. Daniel, what's wrong? He didn't speak. He simply spun his monitor around for her to read the email. She leaned in her eyes, scanning the text. The color drained from her face. This has to be a mistake, she stammered. A misunderstanding. Origen, they're our biggest corporate account. The decision is final. Daniel quoted his voice, a low growl. We will not be engaging in further discussion. This isn't a negotiating tactic, Catherine. This is a public execution. Something happened. Something happened today. Find out what it is. Catherine sprang into action. She was on her phone before she even left his office, her voice sharp and commanding. Get me the heads of corporate accounts, customer relations, and JFK operations on a conference call. Priority 0. I want them on the line in 5 minutes. The corporate nervous system of Apex Air lit up like a Christmas tree. Alarms, once metaphorical, were now effectively ringing. An EVP-level emergency call on a Tuesday morning meant only one thing: catastrophe. In a sterile conference room, miles away from the CEO's suite, the call began. 3 VPs, all titans of their respective departments, were patched in their voices, laced with confusion and anxiety. Catherine, what's going on? Asked Bill, the head of corporate accounts. Catherine didn't waste time. We just received a termination notice from Origen Dynamics. The whole contract, effective immediately. They cited a material breach related to dignity and non-discrimination. The email was sent at 8:47 a.m. Eastern. I need to know what contact we had with anyone from Origen this morning. Anyone. From the CEO to an intern. A frantic scramble ensued. Keyboards clattered. Databases were queried. Checking our VIP logs, one VP said, "No flagged incidents, no complaints filed. I'm running a search on all Origen employee travel for today," another added. Okay, got something. We have one executive flying today. Julian Vance, CEO. The name hung in the air. The CEO himself. Catherine's blood ran cold. Julian Vance is flying with us today. Where what? Flight JFK to Seattle. Flight 8:15. Scheduled departure at 8:35 a.m. The timing was too perfect. The email had been sent just 12 minutes after the flight's scheduled departure. Get me the gate logs for Flight 8:15. Catherine commanded. I want to know if he boarded. More typing. A pause. Then the VP of JFK Operations spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Oh God, what is it? Tom. Catherine snapped. He's not on the flight, Tom said. His reservation was checked in, but his boarding pass was never scanned for entry. He's a no-show. A no-show bill from corporate accounts chimed in, confused. The CEO of our biggest client holding a first-class ticket is a no-show. And at the exact same time, his company terminates a $100 million contract. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. Catherine said, the horrifying picture starting to form in her mind. He wasn't a no-show. He was at the gate. Something happened at the gate. Tom, I want the names of the gate agents for Flight 8:15 at B42. I want them pulled off their duties and brought to the station manager's office. I want every second of CCTV footage from that gate from 7:30 a.m. until departure. And I want the station manager on the phone with me in 2 minutes. Go. Now the call disconnected. The hunt was on. In the C-suite, Daniel Sterling stared out his window, the city below looking small and insignificant. A behemoth of an airline with billions in assets and thousands of employees was now scrambling bleeding because of an unknown incident at a single boarding gate. The power dynamics had shifted in an instant. They were no longer the giant. They were the ones being crushed. Mark Chamberlain, the JFK station manager for Apex Air, considered himself a firefighter. He spent his days extinguishing the small blazes of travel, misery-irate passengers, mechanical delays, lost luggage. But the call he received from Catherine Pierce was not a fire. It was a napalm strike. Find Julian Vance, she had ordered her voice, leaving no room for questions. He is somewhere in the terminal. Find him, apologize profusely, and fix this. Do you understand me, Mark? Your career depends on it. Mark, a man whose ambition was only matched by his fear of failure, felt a cold sweat prickle his brow. He immediately pulled the personnel files for Flight 8:15. Brenda Hoskins and Gary Pendleton. He knew Brenda. She was efficient, but had a reputation for being rigid. A few customer complaints over the years for rudeness, but nothing that had ever stuck. He dispatched a supervisor to relieve them at their new gate assignment, ordering them to his office with an urgency that terrified them. Then he started the manhunt. He pulled up the airport's internal CCTV feeds, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He zeroed in on gate B42, rewinding the footage. He saw it all. He saw Julian Vance, calm and unassuming in his hoodie, waiting patiently. He saw the overbooking announcement. He saw Julian approach the podium and hand over his phone. And then he saw the moment the conversation, the subtle shift in Brenda's posture, her dismissive wave. He watched in slow motion, gut-wrenching horror as the CEO of their most important corporate partner was told to leave the priority lane. He saw Julian's calm nod, the way he stepped away, took out his phone, and made a call. A 2-minute call. Oh, Brenda. Mark whispered to the screen, his stomach churning. What did you do? He watched as Julian walked to a nearby coffee shop. He zoomed in. He was still there, sitting at a small table, nursing a coffee, scrolling through his phone, as if nothing had happened. Mark grabbed his jacket and ran from his office, barking orders into his radio for security to keep a discreet eye on the coffee shop. Do not approach. Just observe. Meanwhile, Brenda and Gary arrived at his office, their faces a mixture of confusion and indignation. "Mark, what's this all about?" Brenda began. "Supervisor yanked us off the Miami flight, said it was an emergency." Mark Chamberlain stared at the two of them. He didn't offer them a seat. "Flight 8:15 to Seattle this morning. Overbooked." "Yeah, it was a mess," Brenda said, crossing her arms. "But we handled it. Got the flight out on time. Tell me about your interaction with the passenger in the grey hoodie." Mark said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The African-American gentleman." Brenda's face tightened. "What about him?" "He was... I don't know. He had a first-class ticket, but was one of the last to check in. I asked him to wait while we sorted the seating. He just walked away." "No big deal." "No big deal," Mark repeated, his voice rising. "Brenda, do you have any idea who that man was, Brenda?" And Gary exchanged a look. "Some guy," Gary mumbled. Mark leaned forward, his hands flat on his desk. "That some guy was Julian Vance. He is the CEO of Auragen Dynamics. And at 8:47 a.m., 12 minutes after you closed the gate on him, his company, our single largest corporate client, cancelled their $120 million contract with us." The color drained from Brenda's face. Gary looked like he was going to be physically sick. That's not possible," Brenda stammered. "It was just a procedural request. The area was crowded. A procedural request." Mark's voice was now laced with venom. "I saw the tape, Brenda. You profiled him. You saw a black man in a hoodie, and you decided he didn't belong. You dismissed him, and in doing so, you have just cost this company more money than you will earn in 1,000 lifetimes. You are both suspended effective immediately. Hand over your airport IDs. Security will escort you out." Brenda stared, speechless, her world crumbling around her. Gary just nodded, his eyes wide with terror. The consequences of a few seconds of poor judgment and silent complicity were crashing down on them with the force of a tidal wave. Mark didn't wait to watch them leave. He was already out the door, striding purposefully toward the coffee shop. This was his one chance to salvage the situation, to salvage his career. He found Julian exactly where the cameras showed him. He approached the table cautiously, plastering a look of deep concern and humility on his face. "Mr. Vance," he began, his voice oozing sincerity. "Mr. Julian Vance, my name is Mark Chamberlain. I'm the station manager for Apex Air here at JFK." Julian looked up from his phone. His expression was neutral, unreadable. "Hello, Mark. Sir, I am so profoundly sorry," Mark gushed. "I have just been made aware of the unacceptable incident that occurred at Gate B42. There are no words. It was a complete failure of our standards, a breakdown in our process. The employees involved have been suspended and will be dealt with to the fullest extent." Julian took a slow sip of his coffee. "Okay." The single word threw Mark off. He had expected anger-shouting demands. He was prepared for that. He was not prepared for this serene indifference. "Mr. Vance, this was a terrible misunderstanding." Mark continued, his desperation growing. "A mistake by an employee who has made a grave error in judgment. It does not reflect the values of Apex Air. We value your business. We value you more than you can imagine. Please, what can I do to make this right? We can get you on the next flight to Seattle. I'll clear the entire first-class cabin for you myself. We can offer you a lifetime of our highest frequent flyer status, a substantial travel credit. Anything. Just name it." Julian placed his cup down gently. He looked at Mark, and for the first time, Mark saw a flicker of something behind his calm eyes. It wasn't anger. It was pity. "You think this is about a flight?" Mark Julian asked, his voice soft but carrying immense weight. "You think this is something that can be fixed with frequent flyer miles? and an apology delivered under duress because you just lost a big account. He leaned forward slightly. Let me tell you what this is about. I built my company Auragen Dynamics on two principles: innovation and integrity. Integrity means you do what you say you're going to do. It means your values aren't just a slogan on a poster in your corporate office. They're in every action you take. Your company signed a contract that included a commitment to diversity and respect. Your employee, however, saw my skin and my clothes and decided I was worth less than the other passengers. She didn't see a first-class customer. She saw a problem to be removed. He gestured around the bustling terminal. This isn't the first time something like this has happened to me, but my company is now in a position where we can choose who we partner with, and we will not partner with any organization that allows that kind of thinking to fester in its culture. This wasn't one employee's error in judgment. It's a symptom of a sickness in your corporate culture. You don't fix a sickness with a voucher. Mark was pale, his carefully prepared script useless. He was facing a man who was not interested in compensation. He was interested in consequence. So what happens now? Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. Julian picked up his phone and stood. He had just received a notification. What happens now is that my new flight on Delta is boarding in 20 minutes. What happens to you and your company is not my concern. He dropped a $5 bill on the table for the coffee and looked Mark Chamberlain dead in the eye. The decision, he said, echoing the words from the email, is final. With that, Julian Vance turned and walked away, leaving the station manager standing alone amidst the clatter of coffee cups, a ghost at the scene of a corporate massacre he had been sent to prevent, but had only managed to witness. News of the Auragen contract termination didn't just hit Apex Air, it detonated. The initial shockwave in the C-suite quickly turned into a cascading series of disasters, each one worse than the last. The corporate machine, usually so adept at managing crises, found itself completely outmaneuvered by the quiet dignity of a single man. The first public sign of trouble came not from a press release, but from a tweet. A passenger who had been waiting for Flight 815, a freelance journalist named Sarah Jenkins, had witnessed the entire exchange. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, beyond a passing sense of injustice. But when her flight landed in Seattle, and she saw the frantic whispers online about Apex Air's stock suddenly taking a nosedive, she connected the dots. Her tweet was simple and factual: wild morning at JFK. Watched an Apex Air gate agent rudely dismiss a black man from the first-class line for Flight 815, telling him to wait outside. He was calm, well-spoken, and just walked away. Just landed, and see the airline's stock is tanking. Wonder if the two are related. She attached a short, blurry video she had instinctively filmed showing Julian walking away from the podium. It was inconclusive on its own, but it was a spark. Within an hour, the tweet had been retweeted thousands of times. Apex Air fail and Old Flying While Black started trending. Other passengers from the flight chimed in, corroborating the story. The narrative was out of Apex's control. Inside the Apex Tower, Daniel Sterling and his team were in full-blown panic mode. Their initial strategy was to contain it, to issue a vague apology, and promise an internal investigation. They drafted a statement: Apex Air is aware of a customer service issue at JFK this morning. We are taking the situation very seriously and are conducting a full review. We are committed to providing a safe and respectful environment for all our customers. It was corporate speak at its most hollow, and the public saw right through it. Then Auragen Dynamics made its first and only public move. They didn't issue a press release. They simply updated the travel partners page on their widely respected corporate website. Apex Air's logo was gone. In its place was the logo of their chief rival, Delta Air Lines, with a new banner above it. Orogen Dynamics is proud to announce an exclusive partnership with Delta Air Lines, a company that shares our unwavering commitment to diversity, inclusion, and respect for all. It was a corporate kill shot. It confirmed everything. The story exploded. Major news outlets picked it up: CNN, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. The narrative was no longer just about a rude gate agent. It was about a multi-billion-dollar company making a values-based decision and shifting a $120 million contract overnight. The stock market, which abhors instability and PR nightmares, reacted violently. Apex Air's stock ticker APX plummeted. By midday, it was down 15%, wiping over $400 million in shareholder value from the company. The $120 million contract was just the tip of the iceberg. The reputational damage was costing them 3 times that amount in a single day. The cascade was just beginning. Brenda Hoskins and Gary Pendleton. Their suspensions became terminations by lunchtime. They were escorted from the premises, their careers in aviation over. Brenda, when contacted by a reporter, was defiant. "I was just doing my job. It was an overbooked flight. I made a judgment call." Her lack of remorse only fanned the flames. Her name and photo were leaked online, and she became the face of the scandal, a pariah in a global news cycle. She would soon find it impossible to get a job anywhere in the service industry. Gary silent then, and silent now simply disappeared his complicity, a permanent stain on his record. Mark Chamberlain. Catherine Pierce called him that afternoon. There was no shouting, just a cold, dead finality in her voice. "You had one job, Mark. You were supposed to fix it. He walked away from you. You're being reassigned. Anchorage. Station manager. Effective Monday. Don't bother arguing." Anchorage was the Siberia of the Apex Air Network. For an ambitious manager like Mark, it was a career death sentence. He had failed, and the price was exile. Daniel Sterling, the CEO, faced a revolt from his board of directors. The Orogen contract wasn't just a financial loss. It was a vote of no confidence from one of the most respected tech companies in the world. Other corporate clients, spooked by the negative press and wanting to distance themselves from a toxic brand, began calling their Apex account managers. The City of San Francisco's pension fund, a major institutional investor in Apex, announced it was divesting its shares due to the company's failure to adhere to basic principles of equity. By the end of the week, the board called an emergency meeting. Daniel Sterling was forced to tender his resignation. His golden parachute was cut in half due to the gross mismanagement clause in his own contract. Apex Air was bleeding from 1,000 cuts, all stemming from one single poisoned interaction. They were forced to launch a massive, expensive, and deeply embarrassing public relations campaign. They announced mandatory company-wide bias training. They pledged millions to diversity initiatives. But it all rang hollow. It was a response to a disaster, not a genuine commitment. The public knew it, and so did Wall Street. The damage was done. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Julian Vance sat by his mother's bedside, holding her hand. Her condition was stable, and she was happy to see him. He hadn't told her what had happened. He hadn't checked the news or his company's stock price. He had done what he felt was right, and then he had moved on to what was truly important. His phone buzzed. It was a text from the CEO of Delta Airlines, Ed Bastian. Julian just saw the news. "Welcome aboard. Your principles are our principles. Let me know when you have a moment. I'd like to discuss how we can make our new partnership a model for the entire industry." Julian smiled. The storm was raging 1,000 miles away, but in that quiet hospital room, he had found his peace. The world was changing, one contract, one decision, one act of quiet defiance at a time. The weeks that followed the incident were a study in contrasts. For Apex Air, it was a slow, agonizing unraveling. For Julian Vance and Auragen Dynamics, it was the beginning of an unexpected and powerful new chapter. The fall of Apex Air, the departure of CEO Daniel Sterling, was not the end of the bleeding, but the beginning of a corporate autopsy. The board brought in a crisis management firm which conducted a brutal internal review. What they found was a deeply rooted culture of complacency. Brenda Hoskins wasn't an anomaly. She was a product of a system that prioritized on-time departures over human decency. Internal surveys revealed widespread employee dissatisfaction and a feeling among minority employees that their concerns were routinely ignored. The bias training they had previously implemented was a joke, a 20-minute online module that employees clicked through once a year. The company that presented a glossy image of global sophistication in its marketing was internally a dysfunctional and biased relic. The financial fallout continued. Beyond Auragen, 3 other major tech companies, citing the same values mismatch, pulled their smaller but still significant corporate accounts. The total loss in corporate revenue approached $250 million. Their stock price never fully recovered, settling at a new, lower baseline that reflected their tarnished brand. They were forced to announce route cuts and layoffs, ironically impacting the very frontline workers whose culture had been so neglected. Apex Air became a case study in business schools, a textbook example of how ignoring social and cultural values could lead to catastrophic financial ruin. Brenda Hoskins' personal unraveling was even more tragic. After the initial media storm, she found herself unemployable. The video of the incident, combined with her defiant non-apology, had made her infamous. She lost her apartment, forced to move in with her sister. Her online presence was a toxic wasteland of hateful comments. She became a bitter woman, blaming Julian Vance, the media, and cancel culture for her woes, never once accepting that her own actions were the root cause. She was a ghost of her former, prideful self, a living embodiment of karma's relentless accounting. Gary Pendleton, the silent partner, faced a quieter but equally bleak fate. He was never publicly named, but his termination for failure to intervene in a code of conduct violation made him toxic within the industry. He ended up leaving aviation altogether, taking a job at a warehouse, his dreams of becoming a pilot, forever grounded by a moment of cowardice. The rise of a new standard. For Julian Vance, the incident became a catalyst. The story had inadvertently turned him into a reluctant public figure, a symbol of principled leadership. Initially, he shunned the spotlight, but Amelia Hayes and his board convinced him to use the platform. He sat down for one major interview with Gayle King on CBS Mornings. He wasn't angry or vengeful. He was thoughtful and articulate. This was never about revenge. He explained, his voice calm and measured. It was about alignment. A company is more than its balance sheet. It's a collection of people with a shared set of values. Auragen is committed to building a better, more equitable future through technology. We cannot, in good conscience, financially support a partner that through its actions undermines that very mission. The contract wasn't an expense, it was an investment, and we simply chose to divest from a company that was yielding negative social returns. His words resonated powerfully across the corporate world. The term social returns became a new buzzword. CEOs of other companies started re-evaluating their own partnerships, not just on price, but on principle. The Vance Doctrine, as some in the media called it, began to take hold, the idea that a company's supply chain and partnerships were a direct reflection of its character. The partnership with Delta Airlines flourished. True to his word, CEO Ed Bastian worked directly with Julian to create a new kind of corporate relationship. They launched a joint initiative called Ascend, a mentorship and scholarship program funded by both companies to support minority students pursuing careers in aviation and technology. It wasn't just a PR stunt, it was a deeply funded, long-term commitment. Auragen's employees flew Delta with a new sense of pride, knowing their travel dollars were aligned with their company's ethos. Julian used the momentum to look inward. He commissioned an independent audit of Auragen's own culture, wanting to ensure he wasn't guilty of the same complacency he'd condemned. The results were overwhelmingly positive, but he acted on the few areas of recommended improvement with zeal, further cementing his reputation as a leader who practiced what he preached. The final and perhaps most significant consequence came 6 months later. Julian's mother, her health much improved, watched from the front row as he took the stage at a large philanthropic gala. He announced the formation of the Auragen Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million. Its mission was simple: to fund non-profits and legal aid centers that fought systemic discrimination, whether in the workplace, in housing, or in a crowded airport terminal. A single act of disrespect can be a symptom of a much deeper disease, he said to the silent, rapt audience. We can complain about the symptoms, or we can work to cure the disease. At Auragen, we choose to invest in the cure. He had taken the ugliest part of his own experience, the casual, demeaning dismissal of his humanity, and transformed it into a powerful engine for positive change. He had turned a moment of personal injury into a legacy of public good. The world had tried to make him small to put him outside the gate. In response, he had built a bigger gate and invited everyone in. 2 years passed. The world, as it always does, moved on. The Apex Air scandal faded from the headlines, becoming a footnote in the fast-moving news cycle. But the echoes of that Tuesday morning at JFK lingered, shaping futures in ways both seen and unseen. A humbler trajectory under new leadership. Apex Air began the long, arduous process of rebuilding. The new CEO, a woman named Maria Flores, was a cultural turnaround specialist. She didn't make flashy promises. Instead, she started from the ground up. She spent her first 3 months on the job, not in the C-suite, but working alongside baggage handlers, gate agents, and flight attendants. She listened. The mandatory bias training was redesigned by leading sociologists. It was no longer a 20-minute video, but a multi-day in-person seminar for all 80,000 employees. Promotion criteria were changed to include evaluations on empathy and customer respect. The company culture began to slowly, painfully shift from one of arrogant indifference to one of genuine service. They would never regain the prestige they once had, but they were becoming a better, more human airline. They had learned their lesson not through a memo, but through a multi-billion-dollar public humiliation. Their fall had become a necessary catalyst for their rebirth. The reluctant icon, Julian, never sought the spotlight again. He politely declined offers for a book deal and a movie about his life. He poured his energy into what he loved: his company, his mother, and his foundation. Auragen Dynamics continued to thrive, its name, now synonymous not just with innovation, but with integrity. The Auragen Foundation became a major force for civil rights litigation, funding landmark cases that changed discriminatory policies in several states. He still flew commercial for his personal trips. Occasionally, a gate agent or flight attendant would recognize him, their eyes widening in a moment of sudden realization. They would invariably become flustered, offering him extra amenities, apologizing for an incident they weren't even a part of. Julian would always smile, politely, decline the special treatment, and say the same thing: Just treat everyone with the same respect you're showing me now. That's all that matters. He was flying to a conference in London one day, connecting through JFK. By a strange twist of fate, his connecting flight was at gate B42, the very same gate where the incident had occurred. The area had been remodeled, the carpets and chairs replaced, but the ghost of the memory was still there. He saw a young family, clearly overwhelmed, struggling with their bags and a crying baby. The gate agent, a young man with a kind face, stepped out from behind the podium. He knelt down, gave the crying child a small pin of plastic wings, and helped the parents consolidate their carry-ons. It was a small act of kindness, the kind that goes unnoticed 1,000,000 times a day at airports. But Julian noticed. The agent's uniform was the familiar blue of Apex Air. Julian watched for a moment, a quiet, satisfied smile on his face. The culture was changing. His stand had meant something beyond just a contract. It had sent a ripple through the system, and that ripple in its own small way was making the world a little bit better. His phone buzzed. It was a picture from his mother. She was back in her garden, beaming, standing next to the same vibrant hydrangeas from the photo he'd been looking at 2 years earlier. The caption read, "Everything's in full bloom. Come home soon." He typed back a simple reply, "On my way." He had won no war. He had sought no revenge. But by simply refusing to accept disrespect, by calmly and decisively demanding that the world live up to the values it claimed to hold, he had started a quiet revolution. A revolution that proved that integrity was not just a moral virtue, but the most powerful asset of all. The final karma wasn't the downfall of his enemies, but the flourishing of a better world in their wake. Julian Vance's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but about the quiet, unshakable resolve to uphold one's principles. He demonstrated that in our interconnected world, every action has a consequence, and that integrity holds a value far greater than any number on a balance sheet. He didn't just cancel a contract. He cast a vote for a better way of doing business, proving that one person's dignity can indeed be the catalyst for monumental change. The hard karma that hit Apex Air wasn't magic. It was the natural, inevitable result of a rotten culture meeting an immovable object of principle. What do you think? Was Julian's response justified, or was it an overreaction? What would you have done in his position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help us share it with more people. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder of the power of standing firm in your values. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more incredible stories of karma, justice, and the fight for respect. Thank you for watching.